And with the sound of the hammer against the holy starter, it marks the beginning of the 30th Missal for the Masses, the podcast where I, your host Gary, discuss my world of G.I. Joe, whether it's news, current events, what I'm buying, what's coming in the mail, what I'm reading, what I'm watching, all as it pertains to G.I. Joe. And I close out each episode with a closer look at a vehicle or playset from any time in the G.I. Joe line. This is the Chaplain's Assistant's Motor Pod. And to start off this episode, I'm going to talk about my trip to Terrificon, my favorite convention. I'm not going to say it's my only convention, but right now it's really the only comic/toy/pop culture convention I'm attending, but it is really good. It is really comic book focused, and I really have a fun time there. I did spend the day hanging out with my friends John and Lloyd from The Pint, a pop culture podcast. Met for the first time Stu from Stu World Order podcast. Hung out with him most of the day, and also Eve, podcaster/guest on The Pint. Great, making new friends. And also managed to hook up with Joey and Adam from So Wizard podcast, and even met up with Andrew from Recent Activity Pod. So it was really cool hanging out with my friends all day. Not to mention at Robber Barons Inc., picked up new shirts from Sal and Funk, and, got the new Stranger Things tee. I know I'm not a Stranger Things fan. I've never watched an episode. My wife has been dying for me to watch it, but they had a new Stranger Things t-shirt, and I had to pick up one for my wife, and because it's also Metallica related, I had to pick up one for myself. Now I guess I kind of got to watch the show. But anyway, back to Terrificon. First stop was to see Larry Hama and get on his sketch list. Managed to put down Storm Shadow from his Vietnam days, and put that on there, and just wished him well on his current projects, and also congratulated him on his Eisner Hall of Fame award. So that was pretty cool to see him only a week after him winning the Eisner Hall of Fame. And then for voice actors, they had a few voice actors from the Sunbow series. They had Michael Bell, who most notably as Duke, Francois Chow, who played Quick Kick, and Keone Young, who was Storm Shadow. I also forgot to visit Dan Gilvezan, who is the voice of Slipstream. He was also there. And the other actor that was also from G.I. Joe property was Lady J herself, Adrienne Palicki, who was in G.I. Joe Retaliation. The celebrity thing isn't really the reason why I go. Adrienne had a big line most of the day, and but I did manage to get signatures from Michael Bell on Saturday Morning Adventures number 4, and also on G.I. Joe 52. I managed to get Keone Young over Storm Shadow and Francois Chow over Quick Kick, and it was actually pretty fun. I had a little conversation with him regarding Quick Kick and doing all the bad impressions. So it was a really good time. And Michael Bell was also, they were all really nice. That was really cool getting the signatures. And for comic books, I didn't really want Larry Hama to sign any more because I have his signature on enough different books. So I did manage to go down to Klaus Johnson and get him to sign my G.I. Joe 21 and G.I. Joe 22, because he did the cover for G.I. Joe 22 as well. And obviously he inked over Ed Hannigan on issue 21. So that really nails down all my signatures there. I picked up the t-shirts, and then, hung out most of the day, bought a couple back issues. At the end of the day, I get a phone call from Larry's handler saying that my sketch was done. Went back to Larry's booth, paid for the sketch, and he had his two new prints. The first print was the cover of the 40th anniversary special, the reprint of issue 21, which was Leo Loa's inks over Hama's pencils. So I picked up that. They also had a colored version. I chose the inked version of that for that print. And then the other print was Camp Greer, which looks suspiciously enough, like a certain fictional military base in Utah. And it was really great to get those as well, and wished Mr. Hama, well on his current projects and on Operation Recall, and that pretty much rounded out my day, and then, ended up with a Pepe's Pizza. Really terrific, really fun time with Terrificon. Spent more money than I should have, but I enjoyed every penny. Now, to follow that up was Operation Recall just ended, and my credit card got whacked. So congratulations to Carson Metaxas and the team that he has assembled. Ed Morrill, Ron Rudat, Pennington, all those guys, Bazigian, Mr. Hama. So absolutely, and I know I'm missing names, but congratulations to the whole team. Really happy. And I can't wait to see the backer kit come out, where hopefully we'll be able to unlock the rest of the figures as well. So really cool to get more O-rings. Really excited that O-rings are recognized at a level where it is the standard by which other action figures are judged, especially in 1/18th scale. And I maintain that the O-ring figures are probably the best toys ever made. There was a lot of imitations, but imitation, they say, is the sincerest form of flattery. So that tells you how right they got it in 1982, 1983 with the swivel arm, 1985 with the ball joint neck. So that's really, really congratulations on those guys again. Can't wait to get them in hand. And that only means that the His tank is not much far away for the classified. So, well, I can't wait for her to get charged on that, but that's going to be happening in about a week or so. So with classified mail calls, I managed to get my hands on all 4 of the classified retro Walmart exclusives. I was able to get Gung Ho and Destro before Terrificon, and I was able to pre-order Lady J through Hasbro Pulse. Baroness sold out everywhere, and going into Terrificon, and everybody's complaining about the shipping arrangements by Walmart, which was kind of funny. So Baroness I found reasonably, let's just put it this way, not destroyed at Terrificon, and I overpaid because I missed the initial ordering window. I took a look at them, and I'll do a quick fire review of all of these because it's kind of a full episode today, and just give you some initial thoughts. We'll start off with Destro because he's on the top of my stack. And the big thing about Destro is, you have a little bit different color scheme. Pretty much have the same accessories as the regular issue. Overall, he's a faithful redeco back into a more 1983 aesthetic. They didn't do any remolds for him. He just looks basically like a more affordable version with the more muted paint scheme. This is one that I felt there's not enough different with it to make it seem like I needed to buy this. That's about it. You have the Star Wars pistol, and then you have his regular sidearm, and you have the briefcase. Not much to it. The gold chain is now a silver chain on his amulet. On the card, it's oversized. It's an oversized retro card. You can tell that the painting of Destro on the explosion card back is different. It's more modern. It's in the Hector Greedo style, but it's not Hector Greedo. It looks acceptable. So, and then on the back, you have the multi-language file card, which again is oversized. Not enough of a difference really to make it feel like that if I was to buy this on the secondary market, it would have been worth it for me. I'm still collecting classifieds right now. This hasn't been opened up out, so I can't tell if it has the floppy waist joint or anything, but it's there. Next up is Gung Ho. Now, Gung Ho does have a slightly different paint app. He's more in his retro colors. They also increased the size of his eagle in front of the globe with the knife through the globe. It's definitely clearer on the picture. It's Again, in the Hector Garrido style, this one seems more Hector Garrido-ish with touch-ups on the legs to mimic the action figure. And, they include a grenade launcher, which looks more like what he had in the vintage line. You have the vintage-inspired backpack. You have a proper marine cover with it's funny, it's Walmart, so it's like, it's not the marine, ball and bird. It's this, the Hasbro reinterpretation of it, so they don't have to pay licensing fees to the United States Marines, or if the Marines would even let them use it. But it is more proper. It looks really good. The vest changed, so they have a new vest. So they actually spent some money changing Gung Ho from his number 07 release to this retro card, new head sculpt. This is a figure where, when they did something new with the new vest, I didn't think that the new vest was offensive. So this is a figure where I would probably say you take it off the card and you marry the two figures together to make something unique. I've seen a couple customs. My favorite one was they took the new vest and they painted it into the retro colors and added it to the retro figure. I think that is what I would do personally if I go that route. It's an improvement over the original Gung Ho, but much like my criticisms of the Cobra Commanders, both of them together would make a great one. So, and that's Gung Ho. And next up is Lady J. Now, Lady J is one where they really didn't have to mess with the figure much other than repaint or recolor it. It's in a brighter green. And she looks great. I'm not a huge fan of the change in makeup, although it is brighter, and that is nice. I do like the brighter head. I see that, the baseball cap is fixed. It has something reminiscent of the airborne wings on the baseball cap. It looks really nice. Overall, I like the fact that they fixed the eyes. I like the eyes on this figure a million times better than the original release Lady J. Now, she gets one spear molded in one color with a replacement head. You get a new vintage backpack, a new camera, and you end up with a reuse of the spear launcher from her original, I want to say, number 25 release. I like it. I actually kind of like it a lot. You don't have the bandolier that's on the first issue. Overall, I think this is a huge improvement. Other than the fact that probably just got to change her hair out with the number 25. Again, with these classifieds, I always see something that I like better in one versus the other. I like the fact that, she still has a communicator on her web belt. I really like some modern touches on these, even though they're doing a lot of scaling up of the original looks, which again, I know that I'm harping over the same thing over and over again, but she's pretty cool. And now onto the packaging, you have, again, Hector Garrido inspired artwork that's been tweaked to more accurately reflect the figure inside. And my only complaint about that is her face looks bad. It looks flat. Her face is front on, and it's almost like a dead eye stare on it. And I don't know, it just doesn't sit right. It looks kind of wonky. But overall, I like the pose and stuff. But, this is one definitely don't need the card. Right now the only card that I'm really impressed with is Gung Ho. And again, all these figures have multi-language oversized file cards on the back. And another bonus is they have figure stands, which they should have all been coming with before this. Yet this is 2022. We had figures, you think that when they learned their lesson to put figure stands in 1991, they would have just continued doing that like they did in the 4-inch line. But finally, we got the Baroness. She is a repainted, more muted colors version of her number 13 self that came with the coil cycle. She comes with a sniper rifle that came with the Cobra Island Trooper, and her golden guns from her coil cycle are now black. Her glasses are removable, which means she has these slots on each side of her head. So why would you make them removable? Her different shades of black, much like the original 00 release of Snake Eyes, very well appreciated on this figure. I still like the fact that the girls don't have that ab cut like the male figures do. They have a more mid-chest swivel like the Valaverse figures. And then the other thing is, too, she still has the single elbows. Lady J has the double elbows. And then, again, the packaging has the Hector Garrido-style artwork. So it looks better, but I don't know. It's just almost like this retro card back. They're trying really hard to ape the style. What makes the other classifieds unique is that they just did their own thing. Maybe, I know Adam Riches did the Sergeant Slaughter one, but I think his work on the comic covers, doing the action figure covers, I think he should have probably gotten the phone call earlier to do these, because he really knows how to nail that fine line and homage. Baroness looks really good on the artwork, but the legs look a little thin, especially her right leg looks really thin. Overall, though, it just doesn't sit right. That's my quick look at the current 4 Walmart retro cardback classified releases. Now, we do have a comic book coming up, but before we get to the comic, I did manage to have my tag sale this past weekend, and it went okay. It was, a lot of home goods, but a lot of my G.I. Joes, because, I do complain about having too much stuff. Advertised it probably not well enough, and it went okay on Saturday. The good thing was, some kids came by and, brought their dads along, and I try to cut super deals for the dads, and take this, take that. Your kid really wants to play with this, go right ahead, take this. Don't worry about that. So it was nice. I got rid of some stuff. There was the guys that come around, they have their cell phones out, they're looking to see what they'd flip, and sold all my G.I. Joe comics to one guy. I had 3 short boxes of comics. Now I'm down to 2 short boxes of comics. Not saying there was no issues, but overall it went off pretty good. I got rid of a lot of household stuff, and whatever didn't sell in the household stuff just went right to Goodwill. The G.I. Joe stuff, I'd say I still probably have 90% of it, and that all came back down in the basement. Now, with stuff coming back down, I had been, futzing around with the G.I. Joe stuff, and I pulled down a Vamp the other day, a Vamp Mark II, and I noticed that one of the doors was broken. I was like, whatever, I'll figure something out later. So I'm bringing stuff back downstairs, and I did have an extra, parts Vamp, something I put together with just spare parts that were in my totes, and it had a good door. So, all right, so I start replacing the door. And then I realize, there's other issues. And then, so I've, taken it apart, put it back together again, and fixed the door. And then I'm putting it back up. And then I'm looking at my other Vamp Mark II, because I'm keeping 2. And I'm like, what's this tape doing around the roll bar? And the roll bar was broken on my second Vamp. So a 5-minute little, let me just switch a door out before I figure out what's going on, turned into probably 45 minutes to an hour of taking 3 Vamp Mark IIs apart and putting 2 complete ones back together again, one being nice and super mint, and then the other one being more, 100%, but, a minor issue here and there. Mostly the steering wheel had been cracked at one point, but that just means the steering wheel's in there, and then when I jam clutch back in, I'm not super worried about breaking the steering wheel because it's already broken, so we will have that. On that note, that wraps up my World of G.I. Joe for the week. Now, Want to take a quick look at G.I. Joe 296, the last 5-issue arc of A Real American Hero, as it will be published by IDW, ending with issue 300. Now, the creative team, as it has been, is Larry Hama as the writer, artist S.L. Gallant, Maria Keane on inks, Jay Brown on colors, Neil Uyetake letters, Riley Farmer editor, with group editor Tom Waltz, and research specialist Diana Davis. Cover A is by S.L. Gallant with colors by Jay Brown, so it looks like S.L. Gallant did the inking on it. It is a really cool cover. I like it that we have current Snake Eyes throwdown, Sean Collins throwing a dagger at a Crimson Guardsman holding a pistol. And we can see from the reflection in the blade that it is Laura 343. This is reminiscent of the Incredible Hulk cover where you see Wolverine on the cover, but the Hulk is reflected in Wolverine's adamantium claws. And he's throwing the dagger over looks like some card game table or a dice game table. And you got the two dice that, look like they're in the air, but they're showing snake eyes. There's nothing really going on in the background, so the background's not interesting at all. So it's simple, but that would be my one detractor for that cover. It's still solid. Cover B, art by Jamie Sullivan, colors by Raul Angulo and Audrey Sullivan. And this is the interconnected B variant cover that's going to be it looks like all the Cobra baddies. It's similar to the G.I. Joe one he did earlier in the series. You have an original Hiss with 788, which looks mirrored. And you have a Terrordrome in the back. But the funny thing is, I just noticed you see a Hiss coming out of the bottom of the Terrordrome with the number 827 on it. And that is not flipped. So that's kind of interesting there. And you have a rogues gallery of Cobra and Dreadnoks on the front. You even have Devil's Due, Zanya, and, Zartan and Torch and Buzzer and Road Pig. Don't really see too much. You got some Eco Warriors and Secto Vipers, and you even have that robot from issue number 3. Hydro Vipers. I mean, it's kind of busy, but it's in that Jamie Sullivan style, so that's pretty cool. We have the retailer incentive cover by John Royal and Jagdish Kumar, colors by James O'Freddy. It is Outback, Dusty, and Lowlight, on the attack. So wonderful work by John Royal. It is nice to see his other stuff besides his pinups. I mean, his pinups are attractive, but he really is a great cover artist. I like whatever he does, always seems to be top notch. And we have an online exclusive cover, which I haven't received yet. And it has Dawn Moreno attacking Laura 343. And you have Dr. Mindbender on there. So, got to get that one soon. My 295 also arrived this past week, but the box was damaged by FedEx. It wasn't shipped in a comic mailer. The comic was just laid on the bottom of the box, and it got completely destroyed. Reached out to IDW. They will be sending me a new 295 as soon as they can. And do a quick summary of this book. If you want to skip ahead, a few minutes to get away from any spoilers, go right ahead. It starts off with a little flashback to Genghis Khan for 5 pages before it rolls into the firefight going on since we last left the Joe team as they were confronted by Laura 343 at the end of issue 295. We got a lot of yelling going on, which is kind of uncharacteristic of S.L. Gallant, but it is kind of warranted in this book during a firefight that everybody would be yelling as people are shooting. Overall, this issue is mostly going from point A to point B with some sidestepping, with Roadblock and Rock and Roll and Gung Ho trying to come to the aid of Scarlet's team with Dawn and Helix and Jinx and Throwdown. It's really an action-filled issue with a lot of fighting going on. However, the plot really is an A to B plot. What was Mr. Hama trying to accomplish? It's really just to get Serpentor version 2.0 out of the cloning chamber. And I know Mr. Hama knows how to write tighter. The early Marvel comic books, some people have told me they are very dense with verbiage, but it is not. It's dense, but it doesn't turn into a bunch of talking heads. So it really makes you work hard to follow the comic. However, this book, we're not really following too much because there's a ton of action going on. And, one notable highlight is the fact that there's a Night Creeper, and he has a gun built into his crossbow. That is kind of funny. And we have the Joes loading up in the pit. And, we get a good view of the incinerators, which I don't even know if we've even seen them before in the comics. It's a simple book. It does a lot to not go far. In some ways, it's like a satisfying action book, but in other ways, it leaves you lacking because it's like, could there have been a way to do more or progress the story further? And I don't know. I've read it a couple times and I kind of want to read it again. I just can't put my thumb on my opinion on the book other than the fact that I enjoyed reading it, but I felt like I needed more. I think that's been a theme for me the past 4 or 5 issues as these come out bi-weekly. And I don't want to seem down about them because I do enjoy reading them. And major spoiler alert, it ends with the Cobras finally hitting, quote unquote, accidentally the tank, and then Serpentor is freed. The amalgamation of different leaders, but Genghis Khan conquering all. This Genghis Khan version of Serpentor is unleashed. And that will bring us to the end of issue 296. And that brings us to the cover image for 297, I assume, with Scarlet shocked to see what's in the tube. Is that other project going on? Because it wasn't really mentioned much this issue. So I'm happy to see that. So again, solid issue. Enjoyed reading it. And can't wait to keep reading on this road to 300. And closing out this episode, we're going to take a look at another personal favorite vehicle, and that is 1990's G.I. Joe Locust. The Locust is a small helicopter from later in the line in the 1990s. This is one that I did have as a kid. This was a must-own for me when I re-entered collecting. So I have my 2 complete ones now, one with stickers, one without stickers. The Locust is interesting in the fact that it was released twice the same year. The Locust was released as a green and yellow version as part of the G.I. Joe General, a massive base on wheels that I have yet to acquire. But I had the little single-boxed version, which came in brown and silver with a blue canopy. And that's the one I'm going to talk about. I like the green version. I hope to one day get that. I actually wouldn't mind owning that separately from the General, because the General is a vehicle that when I get it, I'm only getting one of. And I wouldn't mind having 2 of the green Locusts because it's small. It's almost like the G.I. Joe version of the Fang, but it's an enclosed cockpit. Start off with the colors. Again, the main chassis body is brown, and the armament, the landing skids, and the tail rotor are silver. You have a transparent blue canopy for the top and the bottom. Where the character's feet go, you have a bottom canopy as well. And you do have the use of a black rotors, 2-blade rotor, and also a black figure clip. So it holds one figure to pilot it. You can fit a figure on each side of the landing skids. So the blueprint's kind of funny. I'll read it off and use that as also a guide to go over it today. The first thing it talks about is the rotor blades, which they calls aerodynamic high-tech propeller blades. And this is the first thing that I saw and I was like, okay, I just got to read it off this way. It's a helicopter. It's a rotary wing aircraft, and they're making special note to call it an aerodynamic propeller blade, aerodynamic high tech. I think it's just funny that they made the specification for the aerodynamic for the fact that if it wasn't aerodynamic, it wouldn't lift up the helicopter. The next thing they point out is the rear stabilizer for maintaining proper in-flight balance. So on, let's say, a traditional helicopter, it would be vertical. On this one, it is horizontal. So that is kind of a little departure from a traditional helicopter. However, I'll allow it because it does swivel, or it is also incorporated into the tail rotor, which can swivel left to right, which could aid in turning the helicopter. So that is a neat little play feature, similar to the Tomahawk. And then we go to, the landing skids, which they call titanium-supported, damage-resistant landing skids. Well, I hope they're damage-resistant. Make for a hard landing otherwise. And then we go to, it points out the little figure pegs on the bottom, calling the personnel transportation security platforms. Again, it's just like pointing out the obvious. We then go to number 5, the heat-sinking, low-noise, air-to-air missile. Now, these missiles, there's 4 of these that come with the Locust. 2 of them get mounted to the top of the airframe underneath the rotor. You would expect those to be fired off like missiles, exactly as it's called out for on the Locust blueprints. But on the bottom of this, there is a trap door where it stores 2 more that they can drop as bombs. And these are the same mold. So you can play with them as bombs, you can play with them as missiles, you can play with them as both. I really like the play feature. I think maybe with some wording, we could have gotten something that explains them as both a missile and a bomb. They're a very simple missile, 4 stabilizer wings and a nose. The stabilizer wings aren't really that big, so it really looks like a bomb. It also looks like a missile. You have a wire rope. You have a wire rope on the opposite side of the dumbbell peg slot going to a rounded, feature. It looks almost like a bowling ball that's chained to the bottom. A little different verbiage would improve these for me. However, I didn't spend much time paying attention to the blueprints after I built and stickered my Joe vehicles as a kid. Next up is number 6. It's called the propeller activation regulator, which is essentially the center of the main rotor where the Jesus nut would be attached. Kind of an odd thing to point out. And then we go to number 7, the dual side-mounted armor-shattering machine gun. And I think it's pretty interesting that on these, they don't call out the caliber on these guns, that they don't mention millimeter or caliber. I don't know what they were thinking on this, but there's 2 of them on each side. They pivot up and down. They face the direction, the front of the helicopter. So it's not like a chin gun on, let's say, on an Apache or a Cobra or, G.I. Joe language, the Sonic Fighters Apache or the Dragonfly or the Tigerfly. But they're cool. And this is a small helicopter, so I like having a lot of firepower in a tiny package. And then finally we have, on the number 8, the blast-proof, plexiform, transparent wooden screen canopy. You can't say Lexan because that is a copyrighted trade name by DuPont. Overall, it's kind of simple on these blueprints, but some goofy things too. Taking a look at the chassis, right behind the enclosed cockpit, you have a clear view of the engine, and the engine is wide open. There is no armor or panels covering it up from the outside elements. To me, that's both good and bad. It's good because it adds a lot of detail in that one area, a really nice focus for the helicopter. But the bad thing is it detracts from the realism where, molding two covers that could snap over it, be amazing, add, credence to, let's say, a maintenance schedule. If that was your play pattern, it was not my play pattern. My missions were very rarely planned and very rarely, everything was ready to go all the time, ready for a firefight. But it's just interesting and just something to think about, in hindsight, because this was an inexpensive vehicle. When I was 10, I bought it off at the store. I can't remember which store I bought it from. 10 years old in the 80s, where my allowance was collecting nickels at the side of the road and redeeming them for G.I. Joe money. I understand why there weren't panels. And hey, you know what? It allowed me to buy a toy and play with it. The trapdoor underneath where the missiles turn into bombs or missiles that only fire downward is a cool feature. It really did. It made little bombing runs possible with this helicopter. The one thing that this helicopter has always reminded me of is the U.S. Army's Kiowa, which is a scouting helicopter, and it's a little thing too, but this seems to be more of like a modern interpretation of it. And when I played G.I. Joe as a youth, it was my only helicopter, but knowing of the Kiowa and its role in the United States Army, I would use it as that's role where it would go out, scout, report back to the Joes. And then, of course, it would join the main assault on the Cobra forces as well, because, I only had that in, a couple other minor toys for air support. Who would I have piloting this? As a kid, it was always Flint, the warrant officer. In the comic book, I remember issue 104, you had Wild Bill. I've had one of my extra slipstreams hanging out in it. A lot of Joes fit into this. A lot of different eras of Joes fit into this. Hawk, from a G.I. Joeberg video, Paul talked about talking Battle Commander's Hawk in the role of piloting the Locust. And it's a magnificent fit. Other Joes that could fit would be like Falcon. He wouldn't look out of place. Windmill, he has the right specialty as a rotary wing pilot. And then you also have guys that are a little futuristic looking. Long range fits in this as a pilot, even if that's not his MOS. But that helmet looks really cool, and he would look really cool in it. This helicopter blends the line between fantasy and reality well enough that multiple eras fit in. I could put in 1994 Flint in this, and I could put 1985 Flint in this. 1983 Wild Bill, 1992 Wild Bill. We have things at the beginning of the line, middle of the line, and end of the line that just works with this helicopter. And then it just goes to show that, how versatile this little guy is. And how am I going to rate it today? I guess I'll rate it on the 0 to 5 missile to bomb scale. And with 5 missiles to bombs being perfect score and 0 being why would you even have this garbage made? This to me is a must own. And I think multiples in a collection, it's small. I don't think having 2, 3, 4 is a big deal depending on your space, but 2 is definitely not a big deal. This is, to me, a 4.5. This is another 4.5 vehicle. I love talking about vehicles I love, and this is one of them. If you don't have a Locust for your 3 3/4 figures, you should probably pick one up. And if you have one, you probably know how great it is. And if you have the green one, and, do you have Major Storm, piloting it? It's a great little helicopter, multiple role, scout, and it's packing a punch too. So 4.5 missiles to bombs it is. Well, that wraps up a packed Missal of the Chaplain's Assistant Motor Pod. I have been your host, Gary. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed listening to the podcast, feel free to leave a review on whatever podcatching platform you do. Anchor.fm, our host, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pods, or pretty much any other podcatching platform. The Chaplain Systems Motor Pod is on there. And if you'd like to follow me on social media, you can follow me at Chaplain Joe Pod on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, or search for Chaplain Systems Motor Pod. You can also send an email to chaplainjoepod@gmail.com. And remember, the Chaplain Systems Motor Pod is the nerdy little brother podcast to The Pint, a pop culture podcast. And I have to say that because Extensive Enterprises says I do. With all that out of the way, one final missile for the masses. Be decent to each other. See ya.